The afternoon light slanted through the dusty window of a Brooklyn apartment, painting long rectangles across a floor littered with sketch pads and empty coffee cups. Ethan had been staring at the same panel for an hour, his pencil tapping a nervous rhythm against the tablet. The city's noise was a constant hum, a reminder of a world he preferred to observe from behind layers of brick and drywall. A heavy thump from the adjoining wall made him flinch. His new neighbor, Leo, was moving in. Ethan had caught glimpses of him in the hallway, a man built like a linebacker, with a sharp jawline and a gaze that felt like a physical touch. He was everything Ethan imagined for a character in his webcomic. Raw, undeniable power contained in a human form. But reality was more intimidating than fantasy. Ethan avoided him, ducking back into his apartment at the sound of the neighbor's door. The fear was a familiar, gnawing companion. It had spiked recently into something more concrete. A fan had found him after a convention. At first, it was just enthusiastic messages. Then, coincidental meetings at the corner bodega. Then, yesterday, seeing that same familiar, smiling face in the lobby of his own building. The smile didn't reach the eyes. A cold dread had settled in Ethan's stomach and hadn't left. Now, standing in his silent living room, every creak of the old building felt like a footstep. He was wound so tight he thought he might snap. Without letting himself think, he crossed the few feet of hallway and knocked on Leo's door. It opened quickly. Leo stood there, hair tousled from sleep, wearing only a pair of gray sweatpants. The defined muscles of his chest and abdomen were on full display. He looked from Ethan's pale face to his white-knuckled hands. Ethan's voice was a thin whisper. Could he possibly stay here for the night? Leo's brow furrowed, but he stepped aside without a word. The apartment was stark, all clean lines and minimal furniture, smelling of new paint and faintly of sandalwood. Ethan hovered near the doorway, murmuring that the couch would be fine. Leo simply stated the spare room was unfurnished, offering to share his bed if Ethan didn't mind. The suggestion, delivered so matter-of-factly, sent a jolt through Ethan that had nothing to do with fear. He mumbled his thanks, his mind a chaotic swirl of terror and something else he couldn't name. Later, after a tense, silent shower in Leo's pristine bathroom, Ethan's courage failed. He stammered that he should probably go back. Leo just watched him, his expression unreadable. When Ethan finally dared to look up, those intense eyes were waiting. A different kind of panic, hot and fluttering, replaced the cold fear. He managed to ask if Leo could walk him back next door. Leo simply grabbed his phone and led the way. Inside his own cluttered sanctuary, surrounded by framed comic art and shelves of graphic novels, Ethan felt a fraction safer. He offered Leo a drink, a cold brew from the fridge. Leo accepted, his gaze sweeping the room, pausing on a stylized poster of two men locked in a dramatic, charged embrace. Ethan's cheeks burned. After checking the locks and windows, Leo said he should head back. But as he turned to leave, Ethan's fingers, acting on their own, caught the hem of his t-shirt. The words tumbled out before he could stop them, an offer for Leo to stay in his own guest room instead. He braced for rejection. Leo looked down at him, his expression shifting from stern to something softer. He agreed. That night, a soft thud from Ethan's living room shattered the silence. He froze at his desk, heart hammering. Then Leo was there, filling the doorway, holding a small collectible figurine, a gift from a fan. With efficient movements, Leo pried it apart, revealing a tiny circuit board inside. His face darkened. He explained it was a remote device, likely meant to scare him. The last of Ethan's composure crumbled. A choked sob escaped him. In the low light, Leo's features seemed to soften. He promised it was just a cheap trick. He promised he was there. Ethan heard himself ask if Leo would stay in the room with him. A long pause stretched between them, charged and silent. Then Leo gave a single, curt nod. Lying in the dark, inches from that formidable presence, Ethan confessed everything. The fan, the coincidences, the growing certainty he was being watched. Leo listened, then said in a low, firm voice that Ethan shouldn't go anywhere alone for a while. He'd make sure they caught the guy. A profound, weary gratitude washed over Ethan. He whispered his thanks. Leo just turned onto his side, his back a broad, silent wall in the dark. Eventually, Ethan slept. He woke to the smell of frying bacon and coffee. Leo was in the kitchen, effortlessly maneuvering in the small space. On the counter lay one of Ethan's graphic novels, its cover depicting a tense, intimate scene between two male characters. Leo remarked casually that he'd found it on the coffee table. He mentioned it was pretty intense. Ethan felt the heat rush to his face again, mumbling something about it being research. Leo just smiled a little, a faint curve of his lips, and said he found it interesting. The word hung in the air between them. Days blurred into a strange, new routine. Ethan essentially moved into Leo's apartment, working from his laptop at the dining table. He learned the rhythms of Leo's life. His morning workouts in the living room, the way his muscles glistened with sweat, the focused set of his jaw. He overheard tense phone calls about business partnerships dissolving. Leo would sometimes leave with strict instructions to lock the door behind him. One night, restlessness drove Ethan from bed. The apartment was quiet. A faint, rhythmic sound from the living room made him pause. He pushed the door open a crack. Leo was on the couch, a throw blanket over his lap, his head thrown back. The streetlight from the window caught the strained tendons in his neck, the clenched line of his jaw. He was utterly absorbed, a picture of frustrated, solitary release. Then his eyes snapped open and locked onto Ethan's. A command to leave died on his lips. Ethan, heart pounding in his throat, took a step forward. The question was barely audible. Did he need any help? Leo's gaze was incendiary. He didn't look away. He just watched as Ethan slowly closed the distance and sank onto the couch beside him. Under the blanket, Ethan's tentative touch was met with Leo's hand, large and warm, covering his own, guiding him. The reality of it was staggering. Ethan leaned in, his lips brushing the rough stubble of Leo's cheek. It was a question, a confession, a leap into the unknown. With a low growl, Leo moved. The world tilted. Ethan found himself pressed into the cushions, Leo's weight solid and overwhelming above him. There was no more hesitation, only a hungry, consuming clash of mouths and hands. Clothes became obstacles, hastily discarded. Ethan's theoretical knowledge from panels and pages evaporated under the sheer physical reality of Leo, the smell of his skin, the heat of him, the shocking strength in his hands as they mapped Ethan's body. Later, draped over Leo's chest in the dim bedroom, feeling the steady beat of his heart, Leo's voice was a rough murmur against his hair. He'd seen the sketches on Ethan's tablet, the ones that bore a striking, unmistakable resemblance to a certain neighbor. Ethan buried his burning face in Leo's shoulder, admitting he just had a very compelling muse. He possessed an undeniable physical magnetism. Leo's chuckle was a dark, warm sound. He shifted, rolling Ethan beneath him. His hands were everywhere, possessive and demanding, leaving faint marks on Ethan's paler skin. He wanted to know if this was what Ethan meant, if this had the kind of visceral tension he was looking for. All Ethan could do was cling to him, answer with his body, every gasp and arching spine a silent, fervent yes. The outside world eventually intruded. A meeting with his or about an animation deal couldn't be avoided. Leo drove him to the Midtown office in his truck, a silent, protective presence. Ethan, wanting to be less of a burden, took a rideshare home. He saw the fan then, across the street. No friendly wave this time, just a look of pure, venomous betrayal. The fear came rushing back, colder than ever. When Leo returned, Ethan told him, trying to keep his voice steady. Instead of anger, Leo's expression filled with a fierce protectiveness. He pulled Ethan close, his apology a kiss pressed to his temple. That night, wrapped up in each other, Leo vowed in a gravelly tone that if that creep ever came near, he'd handle it. The certainty in his voice, backed by the solid strength of his arms, finally made Ethan feel safe enough to laugh, the sound soft and relieved against Leo's skin. The next crisis was digital. Ethan woke to frantic calls. A grainy, blurred photo of him and Leo had hit a gossip site, fueling rumors about his personal life. He took a deep breath, sat at his computer, and typed a clear, unflinching statement. He affirmed his relationship, condemned the invasion of privacy, addressed the tampered fan gift, and stated he was involving the police. The internet erupted, but support outweighed the hate. His or called ecstatic at the surge in interest for the adaptation. Leo read the post over his shoulder, his hand a warm weight on Ethan's neck. He looked proud. They were walking back from the precinct later that week when a figure lunged from an alley near their building. The glint of a knife. A shout about corruption and purity aimed at Leo. Time seemed to slow, then snap forward. Ethan was shoved safely aside as Leo moved with a terrifying, efficient grace. It was over in seconds, the assailant pinned on the pavement, the knife skittering away. Sirens wailed in the distance. Later, in the quiet of their intertwined apartments, Ethan trembled as the adrenaline drained away. Leo held him tightly, his touch both an anchor and a promise. Months unfolded. Ethan found himself venturing out more, exploring the city with Leo as his guide. He met Leo's family at a loud, welcoming dinner in Connecticut. Life settled into a new, vibrant normal. And often, in the deep quiet of the night or the lazy haze of a Sunday morning, Leo would lean close, his breath warm on Ethan's ear, and ask in a voice rich with amusement and affection if this had the right kind of tension, if this was what he'd been trying to capture on the page. Ethan would always answer the same way, tangling his fingers in Leo's hair, drawing him down. His protests were weak, his laughter breathless. He'd tell Leo to stop being ridiculous. Leo would just smile, that slow, captivating smile, and whisper the words that never failed to make Ethan's heart stutter. Then he'd show him, again and again, just how real their story was.